What if an 8-year-old could out-debate one of the world's greatest innovators? The crowd buzzed with disbelief as little Jake stepped onto the stage, eyes wide but steady, facing none other than Elon Musk. The auditorium was packed with curious minds, skeptics, and reporters ready to witness what many called an impossible showdown. A hush fell over the room as the moderator announced, "Tonight, a debate on the future of technology, featuring Elon Musk and an extraordinary young challenger." Jake's heart pounded fiercely in his chest, the weight of doubt from thousands of eyes like a physical force. Could this boy really hold his own against the billionaire tech mogul? What made this moment even more surreal was that no one had expected Jake to get this far. Just a few months ago, he was a quiet kid from a small Midwest town, often overlooked by his peers and teachers alike. Yet here he was, standing tall, ready to speak his mind on stage, about to challenge the man who shaped the future of space exploration, electric cars, and artificial intelligence. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? These words flashed on the giant screen behind him, the voice of a YouTube host echoing in his ears as cameras rolled worldwide. Jake took a deep breath, recalling all the moments that led him here, the long nights reading about Tesla, the debates with his dog Max in the backyard, the endless encouragement from his mom, Lisa. How many times had people told him he was too young, too quiet, or too small to make a difference? And yet, here he was, proving that courage and knowledge didn't depend on age or fame. The debate began with Elon Musk outlining his vision of a future dominated by AI and interplanetary colonization. Jake listened intently, nodding, absorbing every word like a sponge. When his turn came, he spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Innovation is important," Jake said, "but we must think carefully about ethics. Technology should serve people, not control them." A murmur swept through the crowd. The boy wasn't just repeating memorized lines, he was challenging ideas with a maturity beyond his years. Elon smiled, impressed by the audacity if nothing else, and fired back with pointed questions. Jake met each one with calm logic and honesty, sometimes admitting when he didn't know something but always steering the conversation back to his core message, responsibility and hope. As the debate unfolded, the tension rose and fell like a roller coaster. Moments of doubt were met with sparks of hope. Could this child really change minds? As the final words were spoken and applause erupted, one thing was clear: no one believed this 8-year-old could debate Elon Musk, until he did. The night ended with Jake stepping off the stage, not just a boy but a symbol of possibility. His journey was just beginning, and the world was finally watching. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jake Thompson was an ordinary kid in an extraordinary way. At 8 years old, he lived in Cedar Springs, a small town nestled in the heart of the Midwest, where cornfields stretched as far as the eye could see and neighbors knew each other by name. His house was modest, a 2-bedroom place painted soft blue with white trim, with a small porch where his mom liked to sip coffee in the mornings before starting her long day. Lisa Thompson was a single mother who worked 2 jobs. By day, she was a nurse at the local hospital, and by night, she cleaned offices downtown to make ends meet. She was tough and kind, the kind of woman who never gave up no matter how hard life got, and her love for Jake was fierce and unshakable. Jake's world was shaped by the quiet rhythms of this small town life, the early mornings and late nights, the routine of school and chores, but underneath it all was a restless mind that never stopped wondering about the universe beyond the cornfields. From a young age, Jake showed signs of brilliance, but he wasn't the loud, confident kid who grabbed attention in the classroom. Instead, he was quiet, observant, always asking questions that made teachers pause and sometimes stumble for answers. At school, Jake often felt like an outsider. His classmates thought he was odd for reading thick books on space exploration instead of playing video games or watching cartoons like other kids. They didn't understand why he argued so passionately when someone said robots could never think, or why he insisted that electric cars would save the planet someday. "You're too little to get it," they would say, or worse, "Why do you even try?" Those words stung, but Jake held on to a private world where he was a hero, a scientist, a debater. His best friend wasn't even human. It was Max, a scruffy golden retriever with big brown eyes who listened patiently as Jake practiced speeches or explained his ideas out loud. Max never judged, never laughed, and was always there for Jake on tough days. At home, Lisa noticed Jake's unique spark and nurtured it as best as she could. After long shifts, she'd come home and find Jake surrounded by piles of books and notebooks filled with scribbles and drawings of rockets and robots. "You've got a mind like a steel trap, kiddo," she would say, ruffling his hair, "but don't forget to have some fun, too." Lisa worried about Jake feeling isolated, about the way other kids dismissed him because of his quietness and age. She wanted him to fit in but also to fly as high as his dreams could take him. Their relationship was a mix of warmth, honesty, and occasional tough love. One evening, after Jake came home feeling particularly down because some kids at school called him weird, Lisa sat him down at the kitchen table. "Jake, people won't always get you, and that's okay," she said gently. "What matters is that you believe in yourself and keep going. You're smarter and stronger than you think." That moment stayed with Jake, a reminder that even when the world felt against him, he had someone in his corner who believed without question. Beyond family, Jake's emotional world was marked by his curiosity and a hunger to understand how things worked, not just machines or science, but people and ideas. He wasn't content with simple answers. When he read about Elon Musk, the man who dreamed of Mars and built electric cars, Jake felt a connection. Musk wasn't just a name, he was proof that bold ideas could change everything. Jake imagined debating ideas with someone like Musk, not out of ego but because he wanted to be heard, to push conversations forward in a world that sometimes seemed stuck. This dream was his secret fuel, something he held close when things got tough. At school, Jake's teachers noticed his potential but struggled to support him properly. The school counselor once told Lisa that Jake was gifted but socially challenged, a label that frustrated Lisa because it made Jake feel like a problem instead of a kid with unique gifts. Still, Jake found small victories, moments when a teacher praised his writing or when a classmate asked for his help on a science project. These were bright spots in a sea of challenges. One of Jake's closest adult mentors was Mr. Reynolds, a retired debate coach who lived down the street. Mr. Reynolds had once coached a national championship team and saw in Jake the same spark that had driven his own students to greatness. When Jake timidly asked if he could help him learn to debate, Mr. Reynolds welcomed him with open arms. They met every weekend in Mr. Reynolds' cluttered living room, filled with trophies and dusty books, where Jake learned how to structure arguments, anticipate counterpoints, and speak with confidence. "Debating isn't about shouting the loudest, Mr. Reynolds would say, it's about listening, thinking, and finding the truth in the conversation." These sessions became a lifeline for Jake, a place where his voice mattered and where the idea of debating Elon Musk moved from impossible fantasy to something worth preparing for. But even with all this support, Jake's journey wasn't easy. The tension between his extraordinary mind and the ordinary world around him created a quiet struggle. He battled moments of self-doubt, wondering if his age meant he'd never be taken seriously, if his dreams were just childish fantasies. His mom's love and Mr. Reynolds' guidance helped him hold on to hope, but the path ahead was full of obstacles. One night, after a particularly tough day at school where he'd been excluded from a group project and teased for his ideas, Jake sat on his bed and stared out the window at the stars. The sky was clear, and the bright points of light seemed to promise something bigger. One day, he whispered to himself, "I'll show them." That quiet determination was the foundation of who Jake was. A boy too young to give up, too curious to settle, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. His story was just beginning, and the small town of Cedar Springs would soon watch as an unlikely hero emerged. The journey from feeling invisible to standing on a global stage debating one of the world's most influential minds would test every ounce of Jake's courage, resilience, and heart. But deep down, Jake knew that to be heard, he first had to believe in himself. And that belief, nurtured by family, mentors, and his own fierce spirit, would carry him through the trials and triumphs to come. Jake's talent for debate wasn't obvious to most people. At school, he was often the quiet kid in the back of the classroom, listening more than speaking, but at home, Jake's mind was always racing. When the world outside felt overwhelming or dismissive, he found comfort in practicing arguments aloud, challenging ideas, and testing his thoughts in ways no one else expected. His best audience was Max, the loyal golden retriever, who sat patiently as Jake paced the living room, his voice filled with excitement or frustration depending on the topic. Artificial intelligence can't replace human creativity, Jake argued one afternoon, tossing a tennis ball to Max between points, because machines don't understand emotions or morality. Max barked once, and Jake smiled, feeling like he'd just won a round. These sessions were Jake's way of preparing for a future that others couldn't yet see. In his mind, debates were battles of the intellect, moments when ideas clashed and truth emerged. He spent hours reading about famous debates, watching videos of politicians and scientists arguing passionately, soaking in the techniques and styles. What made a speaker convincing? How did they stay calm under pressure? How could Jake one day stand up to someone like Elon Musk and not be swallowed by nerves or doubt? At school, Jake's peers rarely knew this side of him. Most thought he was just a quiet, shy kid who didn't fit in. When Jake tried to speak up in class, he was often ignored or interrupted. Teachers, busy managing classrooms full of children, sometimes overlooked his questions or dismissed them as too complex for his age. That made Jake feel small, like his voice was invisible. But the moments he did get to share his thoughts were precious. During a science fair, Jake presented a model of a sustainable city powered entirely by renewable energy. His explanations were detailed and well thought out, but when older kids scoffed and said it was unrealistic, Jake held his ground, defending his ideas with passion. Though not everyone understood him, Jake's determination to be heard never wavered. Outside school, Mr. Reynolds was the first adult who truly recognized Jake's debating potential. The retired coach wasn't just teaching Jake how to argue, he was showing him how to think critically, empathize with others' perspectives, and stand firm without being aggressive. "Remember, Jake," Mr. Reynolds said during one session, "the goal is not to win by force but to win by reason." Their weekends together were filled with mock debates on topics ranging from climate change to space exploration. Sometimes Mr. Reynolds would play the role of an opponent, asking tough questions that forced Jake to dig deeper and clarify his thoughts. Other times, they watched debate tournaments online, analyzing speakers' strengths and weaknesses. One day, Mr. Reynolds shared a story about a young debater who had once stood on a big stage and changed people's minds with simple honesty and courage. "You have that kind of fire, Jake," he told him quietly. "Don't lose it." But Jake's secret talent was not just in his ability to speak logically, it was in the way he combined knowledge with genuine emotion. When he spoke about technology and its impact on people, his words carried the weight of lived experience, the struggles of a boy who sometimes felt powerless in a big world. He understood that debates weren't just contests of facts but conversations that shaped the future of communities, families, and the planet. This deeper insight made Jake's arguments more compelling, even when others dismissed him because of his age. Yet, despite his private confidence, Jake struggled with self-doubt. He often wondered if his dreams were foolish. Could a kid from Cedar Springs really stand on a stage with Elon Musk? What if people laughed or ignored him? Sometimes the fear of failure made Jake want to give up before he even started. One afternoon, after a tough day at school filled with teasing and loneliness, Jake sat on the porch steps, his dog Max by his side. "Maybe I'm just wasting my time," Jake said softly, staring at the horizon. Max nuzzled his hand, as if to say, "Keep going." It was in moments like these that Jake's mother, Lisa, reminded him of his strength. She told him stories of her own struggles growing up, of how people doubted her, how she worked hard to create a better life for him. "You're not alone, Jake," she said one night as she tucked him in. "I believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself." Those words became a lifeline. Jake realized that his secret talent wasn't just about winning arguments but about resilience, about standing tall when no one else expects you to. He kept practicing, kept dreaming, and kept preparing for the day when he would finally have his chance. Jake also learned the power of listening. Mr. Reynolds taught him that great debaters were also great listeners, people who understood their opponent's fears and hopes before responding. Jake began paying closer attention to his classmates' worries, even if they didn't always welcome him. He tried to find common ground, knowing that winning an argument meant more than just proving someone wrong, it meant building bridges. Slowly, Jake's reputation began to change. Some kids started asking him questions about space and technology, intrigued by his knowledge. Teachers who once overlooked him took notice of his thoughtful essays and persuasive speeches. Even though Jake was still the smallest kid in the room, his voice was growing louder in unexpected ways. The turning point came during a local youth forum on climate change. Jake was invited to speak alongside older students, and though he felt nervous, he prepared diligently. When it was his turn, he spoke clearly and passionately about how new technologies must be balanced with ethical considerations. The crowd was surprised by the insight and maturity of his arguments. For the first time, Jake saw that age was not a barrier but a unique strength. His fresh perspective challenged assumptions and opened minds. After the event, a reporter approached Jake, asking if he wanted to participate in a national innovation contest judged by prominent tech leaders, including Elon Musk himself. At first, Jake couldn't believe it. Was this a joke? How could he compete with teenagers and adults with years of experience? But then he remembered the nights of practice with Max, the encouragement from Lisa and Mr. Reynolds, and the moments when he refused to give up. Maybe this was his chance. As Jake prepared his application, his secret talent became his greatest weapon. He crafted arguments that were clear, thoughtful, and deeply personal. He studied everything about the contest's themes, technology, ethics, future innovation, and rehearsed tirelessly. The quiet kid from Cedar Springs was ready to step into the spotlight. This was more than just a competition. It was a chance to prove that knowledge and courage aren't measured by age or size. And as the days counted down to the contest, Jake's secret world of debates with Max and quiet determination was about to become the story the world wouldn't believe until they saw it with their own eyes. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Winning the contest wouldn't be easy. He would face skepticism, pressure, and unexpected challenges. Still, he was ready to face them all, fueled by a secret talent that had been quietly growing inside him since the day he first argued aloud to a patient dog in a small Midwestern home. The day the invitation arrived, Jake could hardly believe his eyes. An official letter from the National Youth Innovation Contest, addressed to Jake Thompson, 8 years old, Cedar Springs, Midwest. The letter explained that his application had been accepted, and he was invited to participate in a televised debate and innovation showcase judged by some of the biggest names in technology, Elon Musk included. At first, the excitement was overwhelming, but as the reality set in, so did the weight of expectations. Jake had dreamed of moments like this, but now that it was real, the pressure pressed down like a heavy storm cloud. Lisa was thrilled and nervous in equal measure. She hugged Jake tightly and said, "You're going to show them what you're made of, kiddo. Just be yourself." But even with her support, the small town buzzed with whispers. Neighbors doubted an 8-year-old could compete with teenagers and young adults from around the country. "It's cute, but he doesn't stand a chance," some said. At school, the whispers turned into outright teasing. "You're gonna get crushed," a classmate sneered. Why even try? Jake's confidence wavered for the first time since he started preparing. His teachers were divided, some encouraged him, but others warned he was out of his depth. Meanwhile, the contest organizers made it clear this was no children's game. Jake would be competing in debates that required a sophisticated understanding of technology, ethics, and economics. The stakes were high, and the audience would be ruthless. Mr. Reynolds doubled down on coaching, pushing Jake harder than ever. "You need to be ready for anything," he said, eyes serious. "Questions will come from every angle, and you'll need to think fast. But remember, your strength is your honesty and your ability to connect." Jake spent countless evenings practicing rebuttals, learning to handle interruptions, and refining his message about responsible innovation. But no amount of preparation could shield him from the emotional storm brewing inside. At home, Lisa noticed Jake growing quieter, more withdrawn. One night, she found him staring at his debate notes, tears in his eyes. "It's not that I'm scared of Elon Musk," Jake whispered. "It's that no one really believes I can do this. Everyone thinks I'm just a kid playing pretend." Lisa sat beside him, holding his small hand in hers. "Sometimes, the hardest part isn't proving others wrong. It's believing in yourself when no one else does." Jake nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The weeks leading up to the contest were a whirlwind of interviews, rehearsals, and public appearances. National media picked up the story, 8-year-old to debate Elon Musk, the ultimate underdog. With every headline, Jake felt more exposed and vulnerable. Behind the cameras, the pressure from adults who questioned his readiness grew louder. Some experts publicly criticized the decision to include a child in such a high-stakes event, calling it exploitative or a gimmick. Even some of Jake's closest friends began to pull away, unsure how to relate to someone suddenly thrust into the spotlight. The night before the contest, Jake sat alone on the porch, Max curled up at his feet. The stars above seemed distant and cold. He replayed the worst-case scenarios in his mind, forgetting his points, stumbling over words, being laughed off stage. "What if I'm not ready?" he thought, heart heavy. But then he remembered Mr. Reynolds' words and his mother's unwavering belief. Taking a deep breath, Jake whispered, "I'm ready." The next morning, Jake boarded a plane bound for the contest venue, a sprawling convention center in a big city far from Cedar Springs. The bright lights and bustling crowds were overwhelming, and Jake felt the sting of homesickness. Yet beneath the fear, there was a growing sense of purpose. This was his moment. On the day of the debate, the room was packed with competitors, judges, and a live audience. Cameras flashed, and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Jake took his place on the stage beside Elon Musk. The billionaire smiled politely, but his eyes held a spark of challenge. The debate topic was clear: how should society balance rapid technological advancement with ethical responsibility? Elon Musk began with a sweeping vision of progress fueled by innovation and risk-taking. Jake listened carefully, noting the sharp points and the bold predictions. When it was his turn, Jake stood tall and spoke with clarity and conviction. "Technology can open doors we never imagined, but without ethics, it can also close them forever. We must ask not just, can we do this, but, should we do this?" The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Elon countered, pushing back on Jake's points with technical details and provocative questions. The tension grew as they volleyed ideas back and forth, sometimes heated, sometimes surprisingly respectful. Jake faced moments of doubt as Elon challenged him with facts he hadn't anticipated, but he stayed composed, acknowledging gaps in his knowledge while returning to his core message of responsibility and hope. Midway through the debate, a surprising turn shifted the energy. Jake asked Elon about the impact of automation on working-class families, a subject Elon had touched on but not fully addressed. The question struck a chord, and Elon paused, nodding thoughtfully. That moment of connection sparked hope in the audience. Here was a debate not just about ideas but about real people's lives. The dialogue deepened, becoming less a contest and more a conversation about the future everyone would face. As the debate reached its climax, Jake found his voice growing stronger. He spoke about his small town, about his mother working tirelessly, about the importance of including voices like his in shaping technology's path. The audience responded with applause and cheers. When the debate ended, the applause was thunderous. Jake had done more than hold his own, he had changed minds, sparked new questions, and earned respect from a room full of skeptics. Elon Musk himself shook Jake's hand and said quietly, "You've got a bright future, kid." But even as the spotlight shone, Jake knew the real work was just beginning. The rising conflict was not over. Behind the scenes, challenges remained. Navigating newfound fame, handling critics who questioned his age and experience, and figuring out what it meant to be a young voice in a complex, fast-moving world. The path ahead would test Jake's resilience like never before, forcing him to grow, learn, and lead in ways he had only dreamed of. Yet, through it all, Jake carried a quiet hope, that by speaking up, by daring to challenge the status quo, he could help build a future where technology served everyone, not just the powerful. This hope was the fire that pushed him forward, even when the road was steep and uncertain. The story of the 8-year-old who debated Elon Musk was no longer just a headline, it was a journey of courage, conflict, and the unyielding belief that one voice, no matter how small, can change the world. After the debate, Jake's life transformed overnight, but not in the way he had expected. The spotlight that once felt thrilling quickly became a complicated maze of expectations, pressures, and constant scrutiny. The national media continued to follow his every move. Social media buzzed with debates about whether an 8-year-old should be allowed in such high-profile contests, some praising his courage, others criticizing his readiness. Jake found himself thrust into a world far removed from the quiet cornfields of Cedar Springs. The contest organizers invited him to join a special innovation program designed for promising young minds. It was a 3-month journey of workshops, mentorships, and projects in a bustling tech hub miles away from home. For Jake, this was both exhilarating and terrifying. He left behind the comfort of his family and small town to step into an unfamiliar city filled with strangers, towering skyscrapers, and relentless energy. At first, Jake struggled to find his footing. The other kids in the program were older, some already coding apps, designing robots, or pitching startups. Jake worried he'd be seen as the kid again, the youngest, smallest, least experienced. But the program's mentors recognized Jake's unique voice and passion. They pushed him to think beyond what he thought possible. Innovation isn't just about technology, one mentor told him. It's about empathy, about understanding the people technology serves. Over the weeks, Jake dived into projects that stretched his mind and challenged his beliefs. He worked on a prototype for a community-driven app that helped families share resources and support each other. He learned to code basic programs and design user interfaces. But more importantly, he learned to collaborate, to listen, and to lead conversations about ethics and impact. There were moments of frustration. When code wouldn't work, when ideas clashed, or when Jake felt overwhelmed by how much he still didn't know. But with each setback, he found resilience. One night, after a long day of coding and meetings, Jake sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, feeling small amid the vastness. His phone buzzed with a message from his mom, "Proud of you every day. Keep going." That simple message reignited his determination. Jake realized this journey was about more than proving himself to others, it was about growing into the person he wanted to become. Midway through the program, the participants were tasked with presenting their projects to a panel of judges, including some of the same tech leaders Jake had faced before. This was the moment to show what they had learned, how they had applied their talents to real-world problems. Jake prepared a presentation about his community app, emphasizing its potential to connect people in both big cities and small towns like Cedar Springs. When his turn came, Jake spoke confidently, weaving in stories from his own life, about his mom, his dog Max, and the importance of helping neighbors. The judges listened attentively, impressed by his vision and sincerity. Afterward, one judge pulled Jake aside and said, "You remind us that innovation is as much about heart as it is about technology." But just as things seemed to be looking up, Jake faced a new challenge. During a group brainstorming session, a disagreement exploded. Some participants wanted to prioritize flashy gadgets and high-tech solutions, while Jake argued for accessibility and ethics. The debate grew heated, voices rising, and Jake felt isolated. "You're holding us back," one older participant snapped. "This isn't a charity project." The word stung, but Jake stood his ground. "If we don't think about who's left out, what's the point?" he replied firmly. The tension was thick, and for the first time, Jake questioned whether he belonged here. That night, Jake confided in Mr. Reynolds, who had flown in to visit. "This is part of the journey," Mr. Reynolds said wisely. "Conflict isn't just a hurdle, it's an opportunity to grow stronger and clarify your values." Encouraged, Jake resolved to keep fighting for his vision, even when it meant standing alone. As the program neared its end, Jake was invited to co-host a live panel discussion on future technologies and ethics. Sharing the stage with seasoned experts, he surprised everyone by articulating complex ideas in ways that were clear and relatable. His youth became a strength, offering fresh perspectives that challenged assumptions and sparked new conversations. The final day arrived with a public showcase where Jake and his peers presented their projects to an audience of investors, media, and community leaders. The event was electric, filled with hope and anticipation. When Jake's turn came, he unveiled an updated version of his community app, complete with user feedback and plans for expansion. The applause was loud and genuine. After the showcase, Elon Musk approached Jake with a proud smile. "You've come a long way," he said. "Keep pushing boundaries." Jake realized the journey had transformed him, not just as a debater or innovator but as a young leader with a voice that mattered. He had faced conflict, doubt, and fierce competition, yet he emerged stronger and more determined than ever. Returning home to Cedar Springs, Jake was welcomed as a hometown hero. But more than accolades, he brought back something even more valuable, a deeper understanding of himself and the world he hoped to help shape. The climactic journey had tested Jake's limits, but it also opened doors to a future filled with possibilities. His story was no longer just about proving he could debate Elon Musk, it was about proving that anyone, no matter their age or background, could make a difference when they dared to believe and act. Returning home from the innovation program, Jake expected a warm welcome and a chance to relax, but instead, he found that the challenges were far from over. The spotlight that had once felt exciting now brought unexpected scrutiny. Some adults in Cedar Springs questioned whether Jake should have been involved in such high-level debates and tech contests. "Isn't he too young?" they asked. "Shouldn't he just be playing with his friends?" Even some of Jake's classmates, who had once admired him from afar, began to treat him differently, some with envy, others with doubt. The emotional toll weighed heavily on Jake. He wanted to believe in his potential but struggled against the voices that told him he didn't belong. One afternoon, while sitting under the big oak tree near his house, Jake's mother found him staring at the ground, silent and withdrawn. She sat beside him, sensing the storm inside. "Jake, what's really going on?" she asked gently. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Jake admitted. "Everyone expects so much, but I'm just a kid." Lisa took his hand firmly. "You are stronger than you realize, Jake. Strength isn't about age or size. It's about heart, and you have more than most." This conversation sparked a turning point. Jake realized that true strength wasn't just about winning debates or impressing judges, it was about facing fear and doubt and choosing to move forward anyway. In the weeks that followed, Jake faced a difficult truth: the world wasn't always kind to those who dared to be different. At school, some teachers praised his courage but worried about the pressure he faced. Others seemed wary, unsure how to support someone so young in such a complex arena. Jake's friendships shifted as well. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the changes, while others stepped up, offering support and encouragement. His closest friend, Mia, stood by him, reminding him that he was more than a headline. "You're still Jake," she said. "The kid who loves science and dogs and dreams big." But the hardest moment came when Jake was invited to speak at a local town hall meeting about the role of technology in small communities. The room was packed with skeptical adults, some doubtful of an 8-year-old's ability to understand their struggles. As Jake spoke, sharing stories from his innovation program and his vision for accessible technology, a man in the back stood up and challenged him. "Kid, you don't know what it's like to run a farm or a business here. Your ideas might be nice, but they don't fit our reality." The confrontation rattled Jake deeply. For the first time, he felt truly questioned not just for his age but for his background and experiences. He paused, feeling the weight of the room's eyes. Then, drawing on everything he had learned about empathy and communication, Jake responded calmly, "You're right, I don't live your life. But I want to listen and learn, so together we can find solutions that work for everyone." The room fell silent, then slowly, some heads nodded. That moment was an emotional climax, not just for Jake but for everyone in the room. It showed the power of humility and openness, even in the face of skepticism. The event marked a turning point in Jake's journey. He realized that success wasn't just about being right or winning arguments but about connecting with people, understanding their fears, and building trust. Back home that evening, Jake reflected on the day's events. His mother sat with him, proud yet thoughtful. "You showed courage today," she said. "Not just in your words but in your heart." Jake smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. He understood that this was only the beginning of a lifelong journey filled with challenges and growth. The emotional climax of his story wasn't a dramatic victory or a perfect debate performance, it was a moment of vulnerability and strength intertwined, a lesson in the power of listening and the courage to keep trying. In the weeks that followed, Jake's confidence grew. He continued to speak at schools, community centers, and events, always emphasizing that technology should serve people, not the other way around. His message resonated with many, inspiring others to think critically about the future. Elon Musk, who had followed Jake's progress closely, invited him to visit one of his tech labs. The trip was surreal for Jake, a chance to see innovation in action and meet experts who shared his passion. During the visit, Elon spoke with Jake privately. "You remind me why we do this work," Elon said. "Keep asking the hard questions and don't lose that spark." That encouragement fueled Jake's determination even more. He knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but he was ready to face them with open eyes and an open heart. As Jake looked toward the future, he held on to a meaningful message that had come from his experiences: life is full of surprises, but love and courage will always lead the way. His journey from a quiet kid in Cedar Springs to a young debater standing up to giants was a testament to the power of belief and perseverance. And though no one had believed that an 8-year-old could debate Elon Musk, Jake had done more than debate, he had sparked a new beginning for himself and for those who dared to dream. With the glow of his recent achievements still fresh, Jake felt a surge of confidence. But as life often does, it wasn't long before a new challenge emerged, one that would push him in ways he hadn't imagined. After his visit to Elon Musk's tech lab, Jake returned to Cedar Springs with ideas brimming in his head. He wanted to create a project that not only showcased his skills but made a real difference in his community. Inspired by the conversations he had with experts and the feedback from the town hall meeting, Jake set his sights on developing a sustainable energy solution tailored for rural areas like Cedar Springs. This was ambitious for an 8-year-old, but Jake was determined. He began by researching solar panels, wind turbines, and energy storage systems, devouring books, videos, and articles. With help from his mother and Mr. Reynolds, he reached out to local engineers and university students for guidance. The project quickly grew bigger than he expected. Designing affordable, efficient renewable energy systems required complex knowledge and resources that even adults struggled to manage. Jake faced technical setbacks, failed prototypes, power failures, and financial hurdles. Some community members were skeptical. "Why mess with what's always worked?" a neighbor grumbled. "Solar panels are expensive, and we don't need fancy gadgets to live." Jake listened but didn't back down. "It's about the future," he told them. "Making sure we have clean energy and saving money in the long run." At school, Jake tried to balance his project with homework and friends, but the pressure mounted. Late nights working on designs, coupled with the spotlight still on him, left him exhausted. Doubts crept in. Was he biting off more than he could chew? One evening, after a frustrating day of failed experiments, Jake sat on his bed, discouraged. He felt the weight of expectations crushing him. Just then, his phone buzzed, a message from Mia, his best friend. "Remember when you helped me with that science project? You didn't give up, and it was awesome. You've got this." The reminder that he wasn't alone lifted his spirits. Jake pushed forward, determined to prove to himself and others that age wasn't a barrier to making a difference. Over the next few weeks, he assembled a team of volunteers, students, local engineers, and neighbors who believed in his vision. Together, they worked on building a prototype of a small-scale solar energy system customized for rural homes. The collaboration was both challenging and inspiring. Jake learned to communicate clearly, delegate tasks, and accept help, skills he hadn't expected to develop so quickly. Meanwhile, news of Jake's project caught the attention of a regional tech foundation offering grants for innovative energy solutions. Jake applied, preparing a presentation that detailed his prototype's potential impact on energy costs and environmental benefits. The application process was nerve-wracking. He faced tough questions about feasibility and funding. But Jake's passion and clear vision impressed the panel, and he was awarded a modest grant to further develop his project. This victory ignited hope within Jake and the community. The next phase involved installing the prototype in a volunteer's home. The team faced technical glitches, weather delays, and budget constraints. Yet, through perseverance and teamwork, they overcame obstacles. The first successful test, when solar panels powered a family's home for a full day, felt like a triumph not just for Jake, but for everyone involved. The community began to see the possibilities of sustainable energy firsthand. Local newspapers ran stories celebrating the milestone. Even skeptics started to reconsider their views. But with success came new pressures. Jake's project attracted national attention, with invitations to speak at conferences and interviews on TV. The demand stretched him thin, and the balance between childhood and responsibility grew fragile. One night, overwhelmed by exhaustion and self-doubt, Jake confided in Lisa. "What if I'm not ready for all this? Maybe I should just go back to being a regular kid." Lisa smiled softly. "Being a regular kid doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. It means knowing when to rest and when to fight. You don't have to do this alone." That reminder sparked a crucial realization. Jake began to set boundaries, scheduling time for school, friends, and play alongside his project work. He leaned more on his support network, accepting that leadership meant trusting others. As Jake's energy solution project gained momentum, it became clear that his journey was evolving. No longer just a young debater, he was becoming a young innovator and community leader. This new challenge tested not only his intellect and creativity but also his resilience, humility, and ability to inspire others. Through setbacks and successes, Jake learned that meaningful change is rarely easy or quick. It demands patience, collaboration, and the courage to keep going even when the path is unclear. The chapter closed on Jake standing before a crowd at a local town event, presenting the solar energy prototype and sharing stories of the families who had benefited. His voice was steady, his message clear: together, we can build a future that's bright, clean, and fair for everyone, no matter how big or small our voices are. The audience erupted in applause, a hopeful chorus for the road ahead. And Jake, once doubted and underestimated, knew deep in his heart that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. Despite the applause and growing support, Jake felt an unexpected storm brewing inside. The excitement of his solar energy project and public recognition was now tangled with exhaustion, doubt, and pressure that threatened to overwhelm him. Balancing school, friendships, family, and this burgeoning responsibility was more difficult than he had anticipated. Some days he woke up energized, ready to tackle the world. Other days he felt the weight of expectation like a stone pressing on his chest. At school, the attention Jake received created a divide. Some classmates admired him, eager to hear about his inventions and ask questions. Others whispered behind his back, calling him a show-off or saying he was trying to be someone he wasn't. Jake had never felt more alone. One afternoon, after a particularly rough day filled with teasing and misunderstandings, Jake found himself sitting alone on the playground bench. The sky was gray, matching the mood inside him. His phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Hey, want to hang out after school? We can just chill and forget about everything." That simple offer felt like a lifeline. When they met, Mia listened without judgment as Jake poured out his frustrations and fears. "Sometimes it feels like I'm supposed to be perfect all the time," Jake admitted. "Like if I mess up, everyone will be disappointed." Mia nodded. "Nobody's perfect, Jake. Even Elon Musk makes mistakes. It's okay to be human." Her words planted a seed of comfort and self-compassion that Jake desperately needed. But the doubts didn't disappear overnight. A new challenge arose when a local newspaper published an article questioning whether Jake was being pushed too hard. The piece included interviews with concerned parents and educators who wondered if an 8-year-old should bear such public scrutiny and responsibility. The article spread quickly, sparking debate across social media and community forums. Some supporters defended Jake, praising his courage and vision. Others echoed the concerns, worrying about his well-being. Jake read the comments, feeling a mixture of hurt and confusion. Was he really too young? Was he asking too much of himself? One evening, Jake sat with his mother, tears brimming. "Maybe they're right," he whispered. "Maybe I should just stop and be a kid." Lisa hugged him tightly. "Jake, being a kid doesn't mean hiding your gifts. But it does mean taking care of yourself, knowing your limits, and asking for help." That night, Lisa called Mr. Reynolds, who agreed to visit and talk with Jake. Their conversation was gentle but honest. Mr. Reynolds reminded Jake that every trailblazer faces doubt, from inside and out. "What matters is that you listen to your heart, but also pay attention to what your mind and body tell you. Balance is key." Feeling supported, Jake made a decision to slow down, not to give up, but to recalibrate. He prioritized schoolwork, scheduled time with friends, and set aside quiet moments to read and play. He also learned to say no to some invitations and requests that drained his energy. The change wasn't easy. Some people questioned his shift in pace, but Jake stood firm. He realized that sustainable success required care and patience. At the same time, Jake continued refining his solar energy project, now with a clearer sense of purpose and boundaries. He involved his volunteer team more deeply, trusting them to handle parts of the work. This delegation taught him leadership wasn't about doing everything alone, it was about empowering others. His team flourished, bringing fresh ideas and enthusiasm that enriched the project. Meanwhile, Jake's relationship with his mother deepened. Lisa became his anchor, offering wisdom and encouragement without pressure. Their nightly talks became a sacred space where Jake could be honest about his fears and dreams. On one memorable evening, Jake shared a new idea for expanding the project to include educational workshops for other kids in Cedar Springs. "I want to help them see that they can make a difference too," he said. Lisa smiled proudly. "That's the kind of leader you are becoming." Encouraged, Jake began organizing workshops, inviting kids to learn about renewable energy and innovation. The sessions were filled with curiosity, laughter, and discovery. Jake felt a new kind of joy, one rooted in sharing knowledge and inspiring others. But just as things seemed to be settling, a sudden setback shook Jake's world. A critical funding source for the solar energy project withdrew their support due to budget cuts. This threatened to halt progress just as the team was preparing for a major pilot installation. The news hit Jake hard. For a moment, he felt the familiar pang of doubt return, stronger than before. How could they succeed without the necessary funds? Would all their hard work go to waste? The team rallied, brainstorming alternatives and reaching out to community members and local businesses for help. Jake found himself writing letters, making calls, and presenting the project's vision with renewed determination. The experience was exhausting but taught Jake the power of persistence and the value of a supportive community. Slowly, new donations trickled in, and partnerships formed. While not everything was resolved immediately, Jake learned that obstacles were part of any meaningful journey. And that setbacks didn't have to define the outcome. Through it all, Jake's emotional growth shone brightest. He discovered that true courage wasn't the absence of fear or doubt, but the choice to move forward in spite of them. His message evolved from simply, "I can do this," to, "We can do this together." This shift resonated deeply with everyone around him. As the chapter closed, Jake stood at the edge of the town's community center, looking out at the faces of the kids he had inspired. They weren't just listeners, they were future leaders, dreamers, and doers. Jake smiled, knowing that while his journey was far from over, he was no longer walking it alone. Doubt still whispered, but determination roared louder. And that made all the difference. Jake's journey was no longer just about proving himself to the world, it was about breaking barriers that had long held others back. After months of workshops, community meetings, and refining his solar energy project, Jake realized that the real challenge wasn't only technical or financial. It was cultural. In Cedar Springs, many people had grown used to the way things had always been, resistant to change, skeptical of new ideas, and hesitant to trust young voices. Jake understood that winning hearts was just as important as winning debates. He decided to focus on building bridges between generations, knowledge, and hopes. One afternoon, Jake visited Mrs. Thompson, a retired teacher who had lived in the town for over 50 years. She had once been a skeptic but had recently expressed interest in learning about renewable energy. Jake brought his prototype and patiently explained how it worked, using simple language and relatable examples. Mrs. Thompson listened intently, asking questions and sharing her own stories about life in Cedar Springs decades ago. Their conversation became a turning point. Mrs. Thompson agreed to help Jake organize a town-wide forum on sustainable energy, inviting neighbors, local officials, and young people alike. The forum was designed not as a lecture but as a dialogue, an opportunity to share concerns, ideas, and hopes for the community's future. On the day of the event, the town hall buzzed with anticipation and a hint of skepticism. Jake stood nervously at the front, remembering his early days of public speaking and debating. But this time, he felt different, less focused on proving himself and more committed to listening and learning. The forum opened with stories from older residents about the challenges of farming and living in Cedar Springs before modern conveniences. Young people shared their dreams of cleaner air and better jobs. Experts explained the science behind solar and wind energy in clear, accessible terms. Jake moderated with care, encouraging respectful dialogue and emphasizing that every voice mattered. As the discussion unfolded, barriers began to break down. Misunderstandings were replaced by empathy. Fear of change gave way to cautious optimism. The forum ended with a collective commitment to explore pilot projects and educational programs. Jake's heart swelled with hope. This was the kind of progress he had dreamed of, not just technology implemented but community united. After the forum, Jake continued his work, now supported by a growing coalition of neighbors, teachers, and local leaders. The solar energy pilot installation moved forward with new energy and resources. Volunteers from the town helped with setup, and local businesses donated materials. Jake's leadership evolved as he balanced technical details with community engagement, learning to adapt his communication style for different audiences. Alongside this work, Jake faced another kind of barrier, his own internal doubts about what kind of leader he wanted to be. The spotlight brought praise but also pressure to fit certain expectations. Some wanted him to be a prodigy, a genius, a perfect role model. Jake struggled to reconcile these demands with his authentic self, the curious, sometimes messy kid who loved to explore and occasionally make mistakes. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings and presentations, Jake confided in Mia. "Sometimes I feel like I have to be this perfect version of myself for everyone. It's exhausting." Mia smiled knowingly. "Nobody's perfect, Jake. The best leaders are real. They show their strengths and their struggles." That conversation gave Jake the courage to be vulnerable publicly. In his next workshop, he shared a story about a failed experiment, how he had felt frustrated and embarrassed, but what he learned from it. The kids in the room responded with laughter and applause, relieved to see that even their hero wasn't flawless. This honesty strengthened Jake's connection with his community and reminded him that leadership was a journey, not a destination. Meanwhile, the solar energy pilot project reached a major milestone. The first home powered by Jake's system operated successfully for a full month, cutting energy costs and reducing the family's carbon footprint. The news spread quickly, drawing media attention and inspiring nearby towns to consider similar initiatives. Jake was invited to speak at a regional conference on renewable energy and youth leadership. Standing before an audience of scientists, policymakers, and young innovators, Jake shared his story. Not just about technology but about the power of persistence, community, and authenticity. He concluded with a message that echoed his experiences: breaking barriers isn't about doing it alone or being perfect. It's about listening, learning, and leading with heart. After the conference, Jake returned home to Cedar Springs, greeted by cheers from his friends and neighbors. His journey had come full circle, from a kid doubted by many to a young leader breaking down walls and building new paths. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. Barriers would continue to arise, in technology, in society, and within himself. What mattered was his commitment to keep moving forward, together with those who believed in change. That night, as Jake lay in bed, he thought about the path ahead. The challenges were real and daunting, but so was the potential for growth and impact. With a deep breath, he whispered to himself, "We can break any barrier if we believe and work together." And with that, Jake drifted to sleep, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jake had come a long way since the early days when no one believed an 8-year-old could debate Elon Musk, let alone spearhead a community-wide solar energy project. Yet, even as his accomplishments grew, the lingering presence of doubters created a tension that was hard to ignore. But something was shifting. More and more, those who had once questioned Jake's abilities began to see the undeniable truth: this young boy was making a real difference. It started small. Mr. Sanders, a gruff farmer known for his skepticism, stopped by the community center one afternoon. Jake was surprised to see him approach with a curious glint in his eyes. "I've been watching your project," Mr. Sanders said, folding his arms. "I didn't think much of it at first. Thought it was just a kid's fancy. But that system you installed on the Johnson's farm? It cut their electric bills almost in half." Jake smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. "We're trying to help as many families as possible." "Well, Mr. Sanders continued, "I might just give it a shot myself." Word spread. The doubters who once dismissed Jake's ideas began to ask questions, attend workshops, and even volunteer. The transformation was remarkable. At school, Jake noticed a new respect from peers who had previously kept their distance. Teachers invited him to speak during science classes, and local news stations featured his story with headlines like, "The Boy Who Energized a Town." But with recognition came challenges. Some people expected Jake to have all the answers, to never falter or show weakness. When a technical glitch caused a brief power outage in one pilot home, criticism surfaced quickly. Social media buzzed with comments questioning the project's reliability. Jake felt the sting of disappointment and fear of failure. One evening, feeling overwhelmed, he called Lisa. "What if I let everyone down? What if I'm not ready for this?" Lisa's voice was calm but firm. Jake, mistakes and setbacks are part of every journey. What matters is how you respond. You're not alone in this. Bolstered by his mother's encouragement, Jake addressed the community openly, explaining the issue, the steps being taken to fix it, and how every innovation faced bumps along the road. His honesty and transparency deepened trust rather than diminished it. Meanwhile, the project grew beyond Cedar Springs. Neighboring towns invited Jake and his team to help implement solar solutions, turning a local initiative into a regional movement. Jake's vision expanded from a simple energy prototype to a broader mission, empowering young people everywhere to become agents of change. To achieve this, he partnered with schools and youth organizations to create an educational program combining science, leadership, and community service. The program's pilot launched with enthusiastic participation, inspiring kids to explore their own ideas and collaborate on projects that mattered to them. Through these experiences, Jake discovered a profound truth: leadership wasn't about being perfect or doing everything himself. It was about inspiring others to believe in their own potential and work together for a better future. As the months passed, Jake's personal growth was evident. He learned to balance ambition with humility, confidence with patience. He faced criticism and praise with equal grace, knowing that neither defined his worth. The community's support remained steadfast, united by a shared belief in the power of innovation and heart. One afternoon, Jake received an invitation that both thrilled and terrified him: a debate competition against a panel of renowned experts in science and technology. The event promised national attention and was billed as a test of Jake's debating skills and knowledge. As the day approached, nerves surged. The pressure to prove himself intensified. But Jake reminded himself of the lessons he'd learned: it wasn't about winning or losing, but about speaking with truth and conviction. On stage, facing seasoned experts, Jake held his ground. He articulated his ideas clearly, answered tough questions with honesty, and shared personal stories that connected logic with emotion. The audience responded with applause, impressed by the boy's poise and insight. When the results were announced, Jake didn't win first place, but he earned a special award for inspiring leadership and courage. The recognition felt like a victory beyond trophies. Reflecting on his journey, Jake realized how far he had come from the uncertain boy no one believed. The barriers of doubt, skepticism, and fear were breaking down, not just in others but within himself. He knew challenges would continue, but so would his determination to face them head-on. The chapter closed with Jake standing before a crowd at a community celebration, his voice steady and strong: "No matter who you are or how young you may be, your ideas matter. Your voice can change the world. Believe in yourself, because if I can do it, so can you." The crowd erupted in cheers, a living testament to a young boy's journey from doubt to belief, from silence to a powerful call for change. In the whirlwind of success and growing responsibilities, Jake found himself craving guidance beyond what his family and local community could offer. Though Lisa's support was unwavering and Mr. Reynolds' wisdom invaluable, Jake needed someone who had navigated the complex intersection of youth, innovation, and public scrutiny at a higher level. Unexpectedly, that mentor appeared in the form of Dr. Evelyn Carter, a renowned scientist and advocate for youth in STEM fields. Their paths crossed at a national science conference where Jake had been invited to present his project. Dr. Carter was scheduled to speak on empowering young innovators and happened to attend Jake's session. Impressed by his articulate presentation and thoughtful responses, she approached him afterward. "Jake, your work is impressive, not just technically but in how you inspire others," she said warmly. "I'd like to offer my support as a mentor, if you're interested." Jake, both surprised and honored, eagerly accepted. From their first meeting, Dr. Carter's mentorship proved transformative. She challenged Jake to think critically about the broader implications of his work, encouraging him to consider ethics, policy, and global impact. Their conversations were deep and inspiring, pushing Jake beyond the technical details to a more holistic view of innovation. One afternoon, Dr. Carter shared her own story of early setbacks and the importance of resilience. "Failures don't define you, Jake. How you learn from them does. Remember, the greatest discoveries often come after the hardest struggles. Under her guidance, Jake developed a new project proposal aimed at making renewable energy education accessible to underprivileged communities nationwide. This ambitious initiative combined technology, curriculum development, and community engagement, a true test of Jake's growing leadership. Dr. Carter helped him navigate grant applications, partnerships, and media strategies, opening doors that had once seemed impossible. Alongside these professional strides, Dr. Carter emphasized the importance of self-care and balance. She noticed Jake's tendency to overwork and encouraged him to cultivate hobbies and friendships outside of science. Innovation thrives in a well-rounded life, she advised. Inspired by this, Jake reconnected with old friends, spent more time outdoors, and even joined the school's chess club. These activities refreshed his mind and strengthened his emotional resilience. Meanwhile, the national attention on Jake continued to rise. Invitations to speak, collaborate, and contribute poured in. With Dr. Carter's mentorship, he navigated this new world with confidence and grace, learning to say no when necessary and prioritize meaningful opportunities. One memorable moment came when Jake was invited to a televised panel discussion with leading scientists and entrepreneurs. The topic, the future of renewable energy and youth leadership. Jake prepared diligently, anticipating tough questions and skeptical voices. During the live broadcast, Jake spoke passionately about his vision for a greener, more equitable world. When challenged about his age and experience, he responded calmly, "Innovation isn't about age. It's about ideas and action. Youth bring fresh perspectives that can transform our future." His words resonated widely, earning praise across social media and beyond. Dr. Carter watched proudly from backstage, knowing Jake was blossoming into the leader she had always believed he could be. Yet, even with this newfound mentor and growing success, Jake faced moments of vulnerability. Late nights filled with grant writing and public appearances left him exhausted. Pressure to maintain a perfect image sometimes felt suffocating. During one particularly tough week, Jake missed his best friend Mia's birthday party, causing tension between them. Feeling isolated, Jake turned to Dr. Carter for advice. "It's okay to be imperfect, Jake," she reminded him gently. "True leadership includes acknowledging your limits and nurturing the relationships that matter." Heeding her words, Jake reached out to Mia, apologizing sincerely and promising to make time for her. Their friendship grew stronger, a vital support system amid the demands of his work. As the year progressed, Jake and Dr. Carter launched the Renewable Energy Education Initiative in several pilot cities. The program received enthusiastic responses from students, teachers, and community leaders alike. Jake traveled frequently, sharing his story and encouraging young people to pursue their passions fearlessly. Through it all, Dr. Carter remained a steady presence, mentor, advocate, and friend. Their relationship became a powerful example of how guidance and belief can amplify potential. One evening, reflecting on his journey, Jake realized how much he had grown. From a doubted 8-year-old to a confident young innovator with a national platform, his path had been shaped not only by talent and hard work but by the mentors and community who believed in him. As he prepared for another speaking engagement, Jake thought about the future, filled with challenges, opportunities, and the chance to inspire the next generation. With Dr. Carter's mentorship lighting the way, he knew he was ready for whatever came next. And with that certainty, Jake smiled, stepping forward into the bright horizon of possibility. Just when Jake's momentum seemed unstoppable, an unexpected setback tested everything he had built. It began with a routine inspection of one of the solar pilot installations in a neighboring town. During the check, a critical component malfunctioned, causing a short circuit and a minor fire. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the incident ignited a wave of concern among community members and attracted negative media attention. Headlines questioned the safety and reliability of Jake's project, and some called for halting the program until a full investigation was completed. Jake was devastated. Months of hard work suddenly felt fragile, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his young shoulders. Doubts crept in, had he rushed too fast? Was he truly ready to lead such a significant initiative? Dr. Carter, ever the steady mentor, reminded Jake that setbacks were part of every journey. "This is a moment to learn and grow, not to give up," she urged. The investigative team worked swiftly, and their report identified a supplier error in the faulty component, an issue unrelated to Jake's design or oversight. Despite this, the negative perception lingered, fueled by sensationalized news stories and social media rumors. To rebuild trust, Jake knew transparency was vital. He organized a town hall meeting, openly addressing the incident and detailing the corrective measures being taken. Standing before a packed room, Jake spoke with honesty and humility, acknowledging fears but emphasizing commitment to safety and excellence. "We will not stop until every home is powered safely and reliably," he vowed. His sincerity resonated, and many attendees expressed renewed support. Still, Jake struggled with the emotional toll. Sleep eluded him as he replayed every decision, wishing he could shield his community from harm and criticism. His schoolwork suffered, and he became more withdrawn. One afternoon, Mia found Jake sitting alone at the park. She sat beside him quietly before saying, "You don't have to carry this alone. We're all here for you." Their friendship proved a lifeline, reminding Jake that vulnerability was not weakness but strength. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter helped Jake turn the setback into an opportunity. Together, they developed a comprehensive safety audit and training program to prevent future issues and reassure communities. They invited independent experts to review and certify the updated systems, boosting credibility. The process was painstaking but necessary. Slowly, public opinion shifted. Media outlets began highlighting Jake's proactive response and dedication to improvement. Community members shared stories of renewed confidence and pride. This chapter in Jake's journey underscored the harsh reality that innovation often involves risk, and that leadership requires resilience, transparency, and the courage to confront challenges head-on. By the time the solar project relaunched with enhanced safety protocols, Jake had grown wiser and more grounded. The setback had tested him deeply but had also strengthened his resolve and leadership. Reflecting on the experience, Jake realized that setbacks were not roadblocks but stepping stones toward lasting impact. "Every challenge is a chance to prove who we are," he told a group of young innovators during a workshop. "Failure doesn't define us, our response does." As the chapter closed, Jake stood at a community event celebrating the successful reopening of the pilot program. Surrounded by smiling faces and hopeful hearts, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead would still have obstacles, but Jake was ready, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to make a difference. After the setback and the intense scrutiny that followed, Jake found himself at a crossroads. The community's faith had been tested, and though many stood by him, others remained cautious, unsure if the young innovator's dream was sustainable. Jake felt the weight of expectations heavier than ever. But amidst the pressure, a spark of hope began to rekindle, not just in him, but in the entire community. It started with a letter from Mrs. Thompson, the retired teacher who had first supported Jake's solar energy forum. In her heartfelt words, she reminded him how far he had come and how much his efforts had inspired a new generation. "You've given us more than clean energy, Jake," she wrote. "You've given us a reason to believe in the power of young voices." Motivated by her message, Jake organized a community celebration designed not just to showcase progress but to reignite collective hope. The event took place in the town square, adorned with colorful banners and local artwork created by children inspired by Jake's journey. Families, neighbors, and local leaders gathered in anticipation. Jake opened the event by sharing stories of resilience, his own and those of people who had faced adversity but persevered. He spoke candidly about the recent challenges, emphasizing that setbacks were part of growth. His words resonated deeply. Then came the unveiling of new solar-powered installations, upgraded with the latest safety features and community-driven designs. Volunteers who had once been skeptical now proudly displayed their work, sharing first-hand experiences of the benefits. The atmosphere was electric with optimism and unity. Beyond the technology, the event celebrated the bonds forged through collaboration and trust. Jake noticed how people of all ages mingled, exchanging ideas, laughter, and encouragement. The town felt alive with possibility. Following the celebration, Jake launched a mentorship program linking young innovators with experienced professionals. He believed that sustaining hope required nurturing the next generation and building lasting networks of support. The program attracted enthusiastic participants, eager to learn and contribute. Jake's leadership style evolved further, focusing on empowerment rather than direction. He encouraged men to explore their passions and take ownership of projects, fostering creativity and confidence. As the mentorship program flourished, Jake found renewed purpose. The setbacks that once felt like failures now appeared as essential lessons, shaping a more resilient vision. He also deepened his relationship with Mia, whose steady friendship provided balance and joy. Together, they dreamed of expanding their impact beyond Cedar Springs, envisioning a future where young voices shaped not only energy solutions but broader social change. One day, Jake received an invitation to speak at an international youth summit on climate action. It was an opportunity to share Cedar Springs' story with a global audience and learn from peers around the world. Preparing for the summit, Jake reflected on how his journey mirrored a larger movement. One driven by hope, determination, and the belief that even the smallest voices could echo loudly. At the summit, Jake's speech captivated the crowd. He spoke about the power of community, the importance of embracing setbacks, and the necessity of nurturing hope. He called on youth everywhere to step forward with courage and compassion. His message spread quickly through social media and news outlets, inspiring countless others. Returning home, Jake felt both humbled and energized. The rekindling of hope wasn't just a moment but a movement, one he was proud to help lead. As the chapter ended, Jake stood beneath the stars with Mia and his family, feeling the pulse of possibility in the cool night air. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but hope burned bright, a guiding light for Jake, Cedar Springs, and the world beyond. Jake had learned many lessons on his journey, from technical challenges and public scrutiny to mentorship and resilience. But perhaps the most profound was discovering the true power of a single voice. Throughout his experiences, Jake realized that beyond solar panels, grants, and media coverage, it was his ability to speak up, share his story, and connect with others that created the greatest impact. This chapter begins with Jake preparing for a pivotal opportunity, a national televised debate on climate policy against a panel of seasoned experts and policymakers. The event was highly anticipated and carried significant weight, not only for Jake's reputation but for the larger conversation about youth involvement in shaping the future. As the debate date approached, Jake felt a familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. He knew the stakes were high, but he also recognized that this platform was a chance to amplify voices like his own, voices too often ignored or dismissed. In the days leading up to the debate, Jake immersed himself in preparation. He studied policies, gathered data, and refined his arguments with Dr. Carter's help. More importantly, he practiced telling his story in ways that would resonate emotionally and logically with a broad audience. The night of the debate arrived. In the studio, bright lights and cameras created a surreal atmosphere. Jake faced a distinguished panel, including lawmakers, scientists, and industry leaders. The moderator introduced the topic, the role of renewable energy and the urgency of climate action. Jake opened with a powerful statement that blended facts with personal narrative. When I was 8 years old, no one believed I could debate Elon Musk. Tonight, I'm here to show that age doesn't limit our ability to contribute solutions. Our planet's future depends on all voices, especially those of young people who will inherit it. The audience responded with warm applause. Throughout the debate, Jake navigated tough questions and challenges with composure and clarity. When asked about the feasibility of rapid renewable adoption, he cited real-world examples from his own community and others, demonstrating practical progress. When confronted with skepticism about youth perspectives, Jake emphasized inclusivity and intergenerational collaboration. Beyond facts and figures, Jake's authentic passion and humility moved many viewers. His story transcended policy debates, reminding the nation that climate solutions were deeply personal and collective endeavors. The debate concluded with Jake receiving commendations from panelists and widespread praise on social media. Journalists highlighted his eloquence and courage, often quoting his memorable line, "The power to change the world lies not in experience alone, but in the courage to raise your voice." Backstage, Dr. Carter congratulated Jake, proud of how he had embodied leadership and advocacy. "You've shown that your voice is a force," she said. With his voice now resonating on national and global stages, Jake faced a new challenge, crossing the frontier from being a spokesperson to becoming a true innovator capable of transforming ideas into lasting impact. This chapter opens with Jake receiving an unexpected invitation from a cutting-edge technology firm in Silicon Valley. The company was launching a bold initiative to develop affordable, scalable renewable energy solutions and wanted Jake to join their youth advisory board. The invitation was both thrilling and intimidating. Jake had spent years advocating for renewable energy at the community level, but this opportunity was a leap into the high-stakes world of tech innovation and global policy influence. After careful thought and advice from Dr. Carter, Jake accepted the offer, recognizing it as a chance to bridge grassroots experience with advanced technology development. Upon arriving in Silicon Valley, Jake was greeted by a team of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs eager to collaborate. The environment buzzed with innovation, fast-paced decision-making, and visionary thinking. Yet Jake quickly realized that despite the excitement, the space was also filled with challenges, complex technical problems, intense competition, and occasional skepticism about a youth voice in such a serious arena. Determined to prove himself, Jake dove into the work, contributing insights from his community projects and pushing the team to consider social impact alongside technical feasibility. He advocated for inclusive design, emphasizing accessibility and education as crucial components of any renewable energy solution. The team grew to respect Jake's perspective, seeing how his lived experience and fresh ideas complemented their expertise. One breakthrough came when Jake suggested integrating interactive educational tools into the renewable energy products, aiming to empower users to understand and optimize their energy consumption. This idea sparked a new project combining technology and learning, aligning perfectly with Jake's vision of sustainable impact. As months passed, Jake balanced his new role with ongoing advocacy and personal growth. He navigated meetings with executives, contributed to prototype development, and represented the company at conferences. The pace was demanding, but Jake thrived on the challenge. Alongside professional growth, Jake continued to nurture relationships that grounded him. Mia remained his steadfast friend, offering support amid the hectic schedule. Dr. Carter's mentorship evolved into a partnership of equals, with Jake inspiring her as much as she guided him. Yet, the frontier was not without setbacks. Never underestimate it. Inspired by this success, Jake embarked on a speaking tour across the country, visiting schools, community centers, and youth organizations. Each engagement reinforced his belief that sharing stories was a catalyst for change. He listened to others' experiences and challenges, forging connections that transcended geography and background. Jake's voice became a beacon for many young people searching for hope and direction. Yet, with greater visibility came new pressures. Jake faced critics who questioned whether a child should wield so much influence. Some accused him of being manipulated by adults or oversimplifying complex issues. These voices tested Jake's confidence but also strengthened his resolve. He learned to engage respectfully with dissent, seeing it as an opportunity for dialogue rather than division. Alongside public engagements, Jake continued to innovate and lead projects in renewable energy and education. Balancing advocacy with action became his new mission. He understood that words needed to be matched by deeds, and deeds amplified by words. Through this harmony, Jake shaped a movement rooted in empowerment, knowledge, and hope. One significant highlight was Jake's invitation to address a global climate summit. Standing before world leaders, scientists, and activists, Jake spoke not just for himself but for millions of youth demanding a sustainable future. His voice carried the weight of personal experience, community triumphs, and collective dreams. In his closing remarks, he said, "Our planet is more than a problem to solve, it's a home to protect. Let us listen to every voice, especially the youngest, because their future depends on the choices we make today." The speech received a standing ovation, reinforcing Jake's role as a symbol of youth leadership and the power of a single voice to inspire millions. As the chapter drew to a close, Jake reflected on his journey. From the boy who no one believed could debate Elon Musk to a national and international advocate, Jake had discovered that true power wasn't about age, fame, or expertise alone, it was about courage, authenticity, and the willingness to speak up. With a heart full of hope and a voice ready to roar, Jake stood poised to continue making history. The power of a voice, he realized, could change the world. During a critical phase, the team encountered technical failures that threatened to derail the project. Initial enthusiasm waned, and tensions rose. Jake's role shifted from contributor to motivator, rallying the team with reminders of their shared mission and the communities counting on their success. Drawing on lessons from his past, Jake encouraged a culture of resilience and creative problem-solving. His leadership helped the team push through obstacles, eventually achieving a breakthrough that restored momentum. The success led to a pilot launch in several regions, where the new technology was tested with real users. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive, confirming that the blend of innovation and education created meaningful change. Jake traveled extensively to oversee implementation, connecting with diverse communities and collecting stories that fueled further development. Beyond technology, Jake began engaging more deeply with policymakers and advocacy groups, recognizing that systemic change required collaboration across sectors. He participated in roundtables, advised legislators, and helped draft proposals promoting renewable energy access and youth involvement in decision-making. His influence grew as a bridge between innovation, policy, and community voices. Throughout this journey, Jake remained mindful of his roots. He often returned to Cedar Springs, sharing progress and lessons with local supporters. These visits reminded him of why his work mattered, not just as a career but as a mission to uplift voices like his own and build a better future. Reflecting on this chapter, Jake realized that crossing new frontiers wasn't just about entering new spaces but transforming them through courage, collaboration, and vision. The boy once doubted for debating Elon Musk was now shaping the future of energy and leadership in ways he had only dreamed possible. As the chapter closed, Jake stood at the edge of a vast landscape of opportunity and responsibility, ready to chart new paths and inspire others to join him on the journey. The frontier was wide open, and Jake was just getting started. With every step forward in his journey, Jake felt the rising weight of expectations, from his family, friends, mentors, the communities he served, and increasingly from the world watching his every move. This chapter explores the complex challenge of carrying not only personal dreams but the hopes of many who look to him as a beacon of possibility. Jake had always been driven by passion and purpose, but as his visibility grew, so did the pressure to succeed flawlessly. Friends and supporters expected breakthroughs, critics watched for missteps. His schedule overflowed with speaking engagements, project deadlines, and meetings, leaving little room for rest or reflection. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Jake sat alone in his room, the glow of his computer screen casting long shadows. Doubts gnawed at him. Was he truly ready for all this? Could he live up to the image others had of him? He wondered if the young boy who once hesitated to speak up still existed beneath the mantle of leadership. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Remember, Jake, it's okay to be imperfect. What matters is that you keep trying and stay true to yourself." Encouraged but still burdened, Jake sought balance by turning to his close circle, Mia, Dr. Carter, and his family. Mia reminded him of the joy found in simple moments, like biking through the neighborhood or playing video games, moments Jake often sacrificed. Dr. Carter shared stories of her own struggles and failures, reassuring Jake that even the most accomplished faced doubt and setbacks. His parents emphasized the importance of self-care and maintaining perspective. Despite their support, Jake grappled with feeling isolated. He worried that admitting vulnerability might weaken his influence or disappoint those who believed in him. To manage this, Jake developed routines, journaling his thoughts, meditating, and setting boundaries around work. He also began speaking more openly about mental health during his public appearances, using his platform to break stigmas and encourage others to seek help when needed. This openness deepened his connection with audiences and eased some internal tension. Meanwhile, the demands of his projects intensified. The Renewable Energy Initiative expanded to new regions, requiring Jake to navigate diverse cultures, policies, and logistical hurdles. He faced moments of frustration when progress stalled or stakeholders disagreed. Each challenge added to the invisible load he carried. At one point, a critical funding partner threatened to withdraw support, citing concerns about project scalability. Jake led a series of negotiations, balancing assertiveness with diplomacy, eventually securing a revised agreement. The experience taught him lessons about resilience, compromise, and strategic thinking. As Jake matured, he recognized that managing expectations was not about meeting every demand but about setting realistic goals, communicating honestly, and valuing the process as much as the outcome. He learned to celebrate small victories and forgive himself for setbacks. This growth deepened his empathy, helping him relate better to others facing their own pressures. One pivotal moment came when Jake was invited to mentor a group of younger students who reminded him of his younger self. Their wide-eyed curiosity and occasional fears mirrored his own early struggles. Guiding them reminded Jake that leadership meant lifting others up, sharing burdens, and fostering community. This experience recharged his spirit and renewed his commitment. As the chapter closed, Jake stood at a crossroads, aware of the weight he carried but determined not to be crushed by it. Instead, he embraced the responsibility with humility and courage, knowing that true strength came from vulnerability, balance, and the support of those who believed in him. In the quiet of his room, Jake wrote in his journal, "I am more than the sum of expectations. I am learning to be the best version of myself, step by step." The path ahead remained challenging, but Jake faced it with a grounded heart and steady resolve. The moment Jake had long envisioned arrived with a quiet ping in his inbox. It was an invitation from the World Science and Policy Council, an elite global summit of scientists, educators, technologists, and heads of state. They wanted him to deliver the keynote address on the future of youth leadership in sustainability. The subject line read simply, "A voice for the next generation." Jake stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't a stranger to big moments anymore, but this was different. This was global. He was being asked to speak not just for himself or Cedar Springs or the kids he mentored, but for youth around the world. And he was only 12. The summit would be held in Geneva, Switzerland, his first international trip. His parents were understandably nervous but proud. Dr. Carter helped him prepare for every question, every scenario. Mia, now a fixture by Jake's side, helped him rehearse in her backyard, pretending to be world leaders with outrageous accents just to make him laugh and stay grounded. "Don't forget," she teased, "they might all wear suits, but they're just people. You've faced tougher crowds." Jake smiled, remembering the early days when just getting one adult to listen was a battle. Now he was preparing to stand in front of hundreds of them. The flight to Geneva felt like crossing a threshold. The plane touched down on a crisp spring morning. Banners from countries across the globe waved outside the summit hall, and translators buzzed in every corner of the venue. Jake's name was printed right below Nobel Prize winners and world presidents. Despite the nerves, Jake walked into the opening gala with quiet confidence. The air was heavy with formality, yet when Jake introduced himself to other delegates, he found most were curious and even a little disarmed by his presence. "You're the boy from the solar town, aren't you?" one scientist from Denmark asked. "Heard your debate with the energy minister." That was something else. Jake nodded politely. He had learned by now that people often looked for novelty in youth, but staying grounded was key. He wasn't here for praise. He was here to speak truth. The day of his keynote began early. As Jake sat backstage reviewing his speech, he felt a flutter of nerves creep in. It wasn't fear of forgetting his words, it was fear of not making them count. He closed his eyes and imagined Cedar Springs. The community garden, the solar panels gleaming under the sun, the library where he had studied late into the night. He thought of the kids watching from classrooms, maybe unsure of their own power. He thought of Mia, and Dr. Carter, and his mom and dad. He opened his eyes, and walked out onto the stage. A sea of world leaders looked up at him, some curious, some skeptical, some visibly moved by the sight of a child holding a position of such importance. Jake didn't read his speech. He told it. He told them about the time no one believed he could lead, let alone debate the world's richest man. He told them about the fire, the criticism, the burnout. He told them about the power of community, of transparency, of second chances. And he reminded them that change didn't begin in a lab or an office, it began when someone chose to believe in something better. "We don't need more leaders who talk about youth," Jake said, voice steady. "We need more who listen to them. Partner with them. Trust them. Because we're not waiting for permission anymore. We're already building the future, one idea at a time." There was a long pause. Then, the entire room rose in applause. Not the polite clapping of diplomats, but something deeper, something resembling awe. The press coverage was immediate. Global outlets ran headlines like, "12-year-old keynote speaker steals global summit," and, "Boy from small town energizes world debate." Jake fielded interviews, panel invitations, and offers for collaboration from world agencies. He knew not all of them were sincere, and he became careful about what he aligned himself with. He'd seen what happened to young voices when they were used more for publicity than progress. But there were real opportunities, too. One of them came from an African delegation working on off-grid solar solutions in remote villages. They invited Jake to visit, collaborate, and help raise awareness. Jake accepted without hesitation. Over the next few months, he traveled to rural Kenya, meeting young students who walked miles to school and lived in homes without electricity. He shared stories, built sample solar kits, and worked with local leaders to create educational materials. It was humbling and transformative. One afternoon, standing with a group of children in a small village near Lake Naivasha, Jake felt something shift. These kids weren't just listening, they were teaching him. About resilience. About gratitude. About the universality of hope. "You are just like me," one boy said, grinning. "Only your sun is colder." Jake laughed, deeply moved. Back home, Jake presented the project's findings to an international panel, calling for more inclusive, youth-led development initiatives. His experiences were shaping not only policy but how the world saw young people, as capable, thoughtful partners in progress. Through it all, Jake remained committed to his roots. Cedar Springs was still home, and every international trip ended with time spent in the town that raised him. He visited his old classroom, now featuring a mural of his journey. He played basketball in the same park where he first sketched out solar panel designs on napkins. Jake had crossed borders, both literal and metaphorical, but he never forgot why he started. And now, the world wasn't just listening. It was inviting him in. Not as a symbol. As a leader. As Chapter 17 closed, Jake stood at a lookout point outside Geneva, the Alps glowing in the distance. He took a deep breath, heart full, mind clear. The world had come calling, and he had answered. But this was only the beginning. There were more voices to uplift, more problems to solve, more frontiers to explore. And Jake, still just a kid with a dream, was ready for every bit of it. Jake was back in Cedar Springs, standing barefoot in his backyard, staring up at the night sky. After months of traveling, keynotes, panels, prototype launches, and cross-continental partnerships, this moment of stillness felt unfamiliar but necessary. His dog, Finn, curled up beside him, and somewhere inside the house, he could hear Mia and his mom laughing over a board game. The stars shimmered like possibilities, and Jake, for the first time in a long while, let himself be still enough to wonder what came next. Not what the world expected. Not what was planned. Just what he truly wanted. That moment sparked a turning point. Jake realized that everything he'd done, the speeches, the debates, the installations, had grown bigger than him. It wasn't just a boy and a solar dream anymore. It was a movement. And movements, he knew, had to evolve to survive. He began asking different questions. How could he ensure the work continued even if he stepped away from the spotlight? How could he train others not just to follow, but to lead in their own right? Could he build something that could outlast him? That night, he pulled out a fresh notebook, just like he used to in the early days, and sketched out the beginnings of what he would later call the Radiant Network. It would be a global, youth-led coalition focused on sustainability, equity, and innovation. Its structure would be horizontal, not hierarchical. Kids would be empowered to run their own local chapters, adapt solutions to their communities, and even challenge the central leadership when needed. It wasn't just a program, it was a platform. A living system. A future built by many hands. Jake spent weeks reaching out to contacts across continents, students he'd met in Geneva, kids he'd mentored in Kenya, teachers in Detroit, climate activists from Brazil and India. The response was overwhelming. Everyone was craving something real, something empowering, something theirs. The Radiant Network launched quietly at first. A beta website, a shared mission statement, a few pilot hubs. But word spread quickly. Chapters popped up in unexpected places, remote Alaskan villages, urban hubs in South Korea, rural communities in Ghana. Each group brought its own ideas, its own energy. And Jake watched in awe as the movement took on a life of its own. For the first time, he didn't need to be at the center. And that, he realized, was the point. One chapter, led by a 14-year-old named Priya in San Diego, proposed a peer-to-peer energy exchange program that could redistribute solar-generated power between low-income households. Another, in Indonesia, turned plastic waste into solar lamp casings, reducing both pollution and production costs. These weren't just projects. They were revolutions in miniature. Jake worked behind the scenes to provide infrastructure, access to engineers, legal support, microfunding, but the creativity came from the ground up. He'd become the gardener, not the architect. Still, not everyone welcomed this new direction. Some sponsors preferred a single face for the movement. "You're the brand, Jake," one executive told him bluntly. "We're investing in you." Jake pushed back. "You're not investing in a brand. You're investing in a better future. And that future doesn't belong to one person." Some partnerships were lost. But others, deeper and more values-aligned, were gained. Jake's decision marked a second coming of age. Not the kind that comes with fanfare, but the quieter, harder kind. The kind that forces you to let go of control and trust others to rise. His parents noticed the shift. He spent more time listening, less time talking. He declined another major television interview just to spend an afternoon mentoring students in his old middle school's science lab. Mia, ever perceptive, asked him one evening, "Are you happier now?" He paused. "I think I'm truer now. If that makes sense." It did. The Radiant Network soon held its first global youth assembly, an entirely virtual, multilingual event with thousands of attendees across 6 continents. Jake didn't headline it. He gave a brief opening message, then passed the mic to others, a 13-year-old girl from Morocco working on water desalination, a teenager from Appalachia restoring coal-damaged land, a disabled student in London designing accessible environmental tech. This wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Leadership wasn't just shared, it was multiplied. As Jake watched the screen fill with stories, debates, and solutions, his heart swelled. This was what it was all for. He was no longer alone at the front of a movement. He was part of something vast, resilient, and alive. And as the network grew, it also gained recognition. International agencies began referencing Radiant chapters in their climate strategies. Universities offered scholarships for student leaders from the network. Local governments began adapting chapter proposals into policy. But with growth came complexity. One hub experienced internal conflict over leadership transparency. Another faced threats from local authorities suspicious of youth organizing. Jake convened emergency calls, facilitated peer mediation sessions, and created a rotating ethics council made up entirely of young delegates to review disputes. Mistakes were made. So were breakthroughs. The process was messy but authentic. Through it all, Jake remained calm, not because he had all the answers, but because he finally understood that he didn't need to. He'd gone from being the answer to becoming the space where questions could bloom. Near the end of the year, Jake received a message from Elon Musk's office. It had been years since their debate went viral, and Jake had never pursued contact since. But now, Musk wanted to meet. Not for publicity, but for an actual discussion about youth-led innovation. Jake hesitated. The memory of that day still felt surreal. But he agreed. The meeting took place in a quiet, glass-walled room overlooking the Pacific. Musk was more subdued than Jake remembered, less performative, more curious. "You really built something," Musk said, scrolling through the Radiant Network's homepage. "Not many adults could pull this off." Jake didn't flinch. "I didn't build it. I invited people in." Musk nodded slowly. "Maybe that's the better model." They talked for an hour about decentralization, education, and climate economics. No cameras. No posturing. Just two people with different experiences, overlapping goals, and, finally, mutual respect. As Jake left, Musk offered a handshake. "Let me know if you ever want to collaborate." "I'm serious." Jake smiled. "Only if we build it from the ground up." He walked away not with a sense of triumph, but of closure. What had started as a dare, a headline, a long-shot challenge from an 8-year-old boy, had become something entirely different. It had become a movement of movements. A place for youth to speak, to lead, to fail, to rise. As Chapter 18 drew to a close, Jake returned to Cedar Springs once again. He walked the old dirt path behind the school, now lined with plaques honoring Radiant leaders from around the world. He placed his hand on one carved in wood. "What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" The answer, Jake now knew, was never fame or applause. It was knowing that somewhere, another kid was about to raise their hand, share their voice, and start something no one else believed possible, until they did. The years passed faster than Jake expected. He was 15 now, though the world still sometimes introduced him as the kid who debated Elon Musk. But Jake was no longer just a kid with a clever comeback or a surprise debate win. He was a builder, a mentor, and, increasingly, a symbol of what youth leadership could look like when it was allowed to mature, struggle, and evolve. The Radiant Network had exploded in scale. Over 80 countries had active chapters. Its Global Youth Assembly had turned into an annual summit, rivaling some of the most respected climate conferences in size and relevance. It was run almost entirely by teens and early 20-somethings. Jake watched from within as others took the reins, each adding their own vision, each echoing back the question that started it all: what if someone believed in you before the world was ready? In this chapter, Jake faced one of the deepest transitions of his life. He had come to realize that the movement he helped spark no longer needed him in the same way. That realization didn't sting, it was liberating. But it brought its own kind of grief. He spent days wandering Cedar Springs between meetings and mentor calls, reflecting on what stepping back might look like. Would people understand? Would they let the narrative of child genius saves the world go quietly, or would they feel betrayed that he was choosing a quieter path? The town, now changed by its connection to the global movement, offered him comfort. Jake visited the community center powered by the original solar panels he helped install, now maintained by a local youth team. He passed kids on their bikes shouting greetings, many of them too young to remember a time before Radiant existed. One of them, a fourth grader named Tyler, tugged on his sleeve. "You're the guy who made the world care, right?" Jake laughed gently. "I just helped people listen to each other." "Cool," Tyler said. "I want to build water filters that clean rivers. Real ones, not just science fair stuff." Jake knelt down. "You will. And when you do, there'll be people ready to listen." The next day, Jake called a meeting with the Radiant Ethics Council and proposed an idea he'd been mulling for months, a full transition of executive coordination to a rotating leadership model. No single figurehead. Just teams of youth organizers, elected by chapter representatives, guiding the network's next steps. "This movement needs to grow without me," Jake said. "That's the only way it lives beyond me." Some were hesitant, his presence had been a source of stability, but most understood. "You've already given us the roadmap," said Priya, now one of the most respected members of the network. "Let us drive for a while." The council approved the transition unanimously. Jake's announcement was met with surprise, reverence, and, for some, confusion. Major news outlets reached out for interviews. A few headlines speculated he was quitting under pressure or burnout. But his message was clear: this was never about me. It was about us. Now it's your turn. He made one final public appearance as executive coordinator during the 5th annual Radiant Global Summit. He spoke briefly, then ceded the stage to an 11-year-old from Nepal whose chapter had created a mountainside wind energy system with discarded fan parts and donated batteries. Jake watched from the audience with tears in his eyes. After the summit, he did something unexpected. He disappeared, for a while, at least. No speeches. No live streams. No announcements. He took a gap year and traveled, not for press or projects, but for himself. He visited remote villages in Colombia, explored quiet libraries in Portugal, hiked volcanic trails in Iceland. He talked to farmers, kids, elders, fishermen, teachers. He listened. He asked questions. He felt like a student again. Not the world's student. Just, someone with a backpack and a journal. He carried a simple recording device, capturing voices of people who would never be invited to summits or spotlighted in think tanks. He called the series Echoes of the Future, and quietly uploaded them to a minimalist website he built himself. No branding. No photos. Just voices. Ideas. Humanity. Slowly, educators and activists around the world began to discover the series. Teachers played them in classrooms. Nonprofits translated them into multiple languages. Jake never attached his name, but word eventually got out. And this time, the attention felt different. It wasn't about him. It was about what those voices were saying. "This," Dr. Carter told him when they finally reconnected, "might be your most powerful work yet." By the time he returned home, Jake was different. He walked a little slower. He laughed more easily. He no longer carried the tension of being a symbol. He was just Jake, older, clearer, and full of 1,000 new questions. Mia, who had started a journalism podcast during Jake's time away, invited him to be a guest. "Just one condition," he joked. "You're the host. I'm the guest. No turning it around." They talked for hours, not about policy or platforms, but about identity, growth, friendship, and choosing the right kind of hard. "You ever regret it?" she asked him, near the end. Jake thought for a long time. "No. But I don't think I fully understood what it meant when I started. I didn't know the world would get so loud." Or that I'd lose parts of myself in the noise. But now, I feel like I got them back. And more. As the episode aired, messages poured in. Not just from fans or journalists, but from kids who had grown up watching Jake and now were entering their own stages of transformation. Some wanted advice. Others just wanted to say thank you. And one simply wrote, "I started something. It's small. But it's real. Because you made me believe I could." Jake closed his laptop and smiled. The echo was still moving outward. His voice had never been the destination. It was the opening chord in a symphony that would stretch far beyond him. And that, he knew, was the kind of legacy that truly mattered. Chapter 19 ended not with a headline or a twist, but with Jake walking down the street in Cedar Springs, unnoticed by most, a coffee in hand, a notebook under his arm, and a look on his face that said, "I am not done. But I am finally whole." The morning sun filtered softly through the classroom windows of Cedar Springs Elementary, casting golden patterns across the tiled floor. The school had changed over the years: solar panels on the roof, a greenhouse out back, even a maker lab where kids now built wind turbines out of old bike parts. But the classroom itself still had the same scent of pencils, paper, and potential. Jake sat in the back row, not as a student, but as a guest speaker, waiting to be introduced by Mrs. Hampton, his former third-grade teacher. It had been almost a decade since he first raised his hand in this very room to question a textbook paragraph on fossil fuels. That small moment, forgotten by most, had been the seed of everything. "Class," Mrs. Hampton said, smiling warmly at her curious fourth graders, "we have someone very special visiting us today. You may have heard his name, but more importantly, he once sat in the very seat you're sitting in now. Please welcome Jake Holloway." The kids clapped with polite confusion, some of them clearly not connecting the name with the legend their parents had told them about. Jake stood slowly, walked to the front, and leaned casually against the whiteboard. He looked around, smiling at the wide eyes staring up at him, and said, "So, who here has ever been told their idea was too weird, or too big, or too grown up?" A few hesitant hands rose. "Great," Jake said. "That's where all the good stuff starts." Laughter rippled through the room, and just like that, the nerves dissolved. He didn't talk about the summit or the debate or even Radiant, at least, not at first. He talked about this classroom, about how scared he'd been to speak up, how often he felt invisible, and how one day he asked a question that no one had an answer for. And instead of dropping it, he told them, "I followed it. Even when it led to strange places. Even when people rolled their eyes. Even when I doubted myself." A boy with glasses raised his hand. "Did you ever mess up?" "Constantly," Jake grinned. "Still do. But every time I messed up, I learned something. And every time I learned, I got better. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful." Another child asked if he'd ever gotten tired. Jake paused. "Yes. Sometimes I was so tired, I didn't want to keep going. But then I'd meet someone like you, someone with a wild idea or a kind heart or a really good question, and that would remind me why I started." After the talk, Jake spent another hour helping the class brainstorm ideas for their own community projects. One team wanted to build a solar-powered bird feeder. Another was designing a rainwater collection system for the school's garden. Their enthusiasm was electric, their creativity unfiltered. As Jake packed up to leave, Mrs. Hampton pulled him aside. "They needed this, you know," she said. "They needed to see that grown-ups don't always have the answers, and that it's okay to grow up slowly." Jake smiled, heart full. "So did I." That afternoon, Jake walked through town. Cedar Springs had grown, but its soul remained. Kids waved at him from skateboards and scooters, and shop owners greeted him like an old friend. The bakery still sold his favorite cinnamon rolls, now rebranded as Solar Swirls. At the library, he found a small display dedicated to the history of the Radiant Network. A photo of young Jake, 8 years old, hoodie too big, eyes full of defiance, sat beside a quote, "Don't wait for someone to give you a voice. Speak, and make them listen." Jake chuckled softly. He didn't feel like that kid anymore, but he owed him everything. He walked past the community garden, where volunteers, young and old, were planting native flowers and vegetables. One of the gardeners looked up. "You started all this, didn't you?" Jake shook his head. "We started it. Together." That evening, Jake met Mia at their favorite overlook above the town. The sunset cast long shadows over the valley, and the solar panels lining the rooftops shimmered like a quiet promise. "So," Mia said, tossing him a soda, "you ready for your next act?" Jake took a sip and let the silence settle between them. "Honestly, I don't know what it looks like yet. And that's kind of exciting." Mia nodded. "Not being the guy anymore." "Being a guy," Jake corrected. "Part of something. Not the center." "Feels better, huh?" "Feels real." They sat there for a while, watching the sky shift from gold to deep purple. Finally, Mia asked, "If you could tell that little 8-year-old version of yourself one thing right now, what would it be?" Jake didn't hesitate. "I'd say, you don't have to prove them wrong. Just prove yourself right. And never forget that your worth isn't measured in headlines or achievements. It's measured in how many others you lift with you." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and promise. They stood, stretched, and started walking back toward town. There was no big moment of closure. No dramatic music. Just two friends, a shared story, and the road ahead. Months later, Jake published a book, not a memoir, but a collection of stories from radiant chapters across the globe. He titled it "We Believed Anyway." It wasn't about him. His name was on the cover, but the pages were filled with voices: a teen engineer in Chile, a climate poet from Nigeria, a deaf coder in Canada. It became a bestseller not because of marketing, but because people were hungry for hope. Schools adopted it. Activists quoted it. Parents read it to their children. In the final chapter of the book, Jake wrote, "The most revolutionary thing you can do is believe in someone before the world tells them they're worth believing in." That's how change begins, not with the loudest voice, but with the quiet choice to listen. He didn't go back to the world stage. He didn't need to. He taught, he built, he advised. He planted seeds wherever he went. And every so often, he'd receive a message, an email, a letter, sometimes just a photo, of a new project sparked by a kid who once saw his story and thought, "Why not me?" In the final scene of his story, at least the part we get to tell, Jake stood on the same sidewalk where he once watched Elon Musk's car drive away all those years ago. The street was empty now. Just power lines humming softly and the sun setting over a future no one could fully predict. He looked up, not with longing, but with peace. The boy who once asked, "What if?" had become the man who helped the world answer. He smiled. Not because it was over. But because he knew it never really would be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?